Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
During Teacher Appreciation Week, here are the Back Then Teaching Awards for outstanding achievement in all things great and groovy. Hi, this is Tracy Briggs, and welcome to Back Then. The words have lived in my mind for 37 years. It was 1986, and the professor of one of my upper-level journalism classes was handing back our papers. They were magazine articles we had written. On top of mine, in red ink, she had written, "Tracy, I sincerely hope you don't plan on pursuing a career in journalism." Well, let's put it this way. I was a second semester senior working for the school paper, so yes, I was planning on pursuing a career in journalism. I had always done well in school, but that day I felt like someone had kicked me in the gut. I cried all the way back to my house with my best friend Janet, who, like any loyal best friend, kept saying things like, "What does she know? You're a good writer." And probably most importantly, "Should we just go to Howard's for ice cream?" Janet also told me that I should go talk to the professor to find out why she wrote that comment and get some advice on what I could do to improve. I figured Janet made a good call on that ice cream, so maybe I needed to listen to her, lick my wounds, and go talk to the professor. So with butterflies in my stomach, I walked into the big brick building in the middle of campus, up the stairs to the journalism department. I sat fidgeting in a chair outside her open office door, nervous about the upcoming conversation. But then I overheard something I didn't expect. She was talking to another student about me. She said, "Just the other day I wrote on a senior's paper, 'I sincerely hope you don't plan on pursuing a career in journalism.'" Then she had a good laugh at how witty she was. Hysterical, as much as salt in a wound can be. Through the years, as I've matured, I've come to realize that that was probably just her style. She was trying to motivate me, telling me during our conversation that she thought that I didn't do my best on that story. Maybe that was true, maybe it wasn't. Honestly, I don't really remember. Either way, I'd like to say I'm grateful to her. I learned from her exactly the kind of person I never want to be. Teachers need to dish out a little tough love occasionally. I do get that. But isn't it more effective to challenge students to do their best by telling them they're worthy of doing great things? More motivational kindness, less Simon Cowell-esque mean-spirited comments written in red ink at the top of the paper. Anyway, during this Teacher Appreciation Week, I'm not going to focus on the negative. This past week, I interviewed a few of my Forum Communications colleagues about their favorite teachers. Now I'm going to share a few of mine and bestow upon them my own made-up awards. Don't be too giddy. There are no cash prizes nor trophies, just my enduring appreciation. Before I start, it was impossible to pick just one or two outstanding teachers because I have had so many through the years. They were hardworking, imaginative, and inspiring. But the reasons for choosing these particular educators go beyond the lessons they taught me into the qualities that made them unforgettable. So without further ado, here are my Back Then Outstanding Teacher Awards 2023. The That Girl Award. Mrs. Sales and Mrs. Cook. I'll start at the very beginning. Mrs. Sales was my kindergarten teacher when we lived in Silver Spring, Maryland. Mrs. Cook was my third grade teacher at Lewis and Clark Elementary School in Fargo. They were my teachers about 50 years ago, if you can believe that, so I don't really remember much about the lessons learned, and I don't even recall their first names. They were just Mrs. Sales and Mrs. Cook. But I know that I liked them. I remember that. They were both warm and patient, and best of all, both of them had that cool flipped-up hair like Marlo Thomas on That Girl. I thought that was really cool. I kind of idolized them. For me, they defined what it meant to be a professional, smart, and obviously groovy woman of the early 1970s. The Kindness Award. Dennis Calpine. Mr. Calpine was one of my math teachers at Fargo South High. Of course, the irony here is that I hate math. So it clearly wasn't the subject matter that made Mr. Calpine one of my favorites. I appreciated him for his kindness. It was the second semester of my sophomore year, and I tried out for next year's pom-pom squad. That's basically South High's earlier version of the dance line or Bruin kicks. Well, Mr. Calpine was one of the judges, along with a few other teachers and coaches. Unfortunately, I didn't make the team. I was devastated. But as I walked into math class the next day, eyes probably still swollen from a night of crying, Mr. Calpine said, with a grin that made his eyes crinkle, "I think you were great, and I just know you're going to make it next year." It was one offhanded comment that he probably didn't think about twice. But it made a big difference to me. It gave me the confidence to try again. And I made the squad the next year, just like he said. Just like my parents had done, Mr. Calpine encouraged me to never give up. I also learned the power of simple words of kindness to lift someone else's spirit. Given that he taught math, he probably had plenty of opportunity to write nasty notes in red ink at the top of my tests, but he never did. He was a gentle and guiding force in teaching math, even to those of us who hated it. It's interesting to note that Mr. Calpine ended up having a long career as a football coach. He is also the father of 4 daughters. So that man clearly knows a little something about motivation and kindness. The Enduring Advice Award, Mary Ann Armbrust. Mary Ann Armbrust is a Facebook friend of mine these days, who I still can't quite bring myself to call Mary Ann. She is and always will be Mrs. Armbrust. You could describe her as walking sunshine. She had the effervescence of Sue Ann Nivens from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, but with real sincerity, not sarcasm and snark. I had her for a class called Living on Your Own. Now that might sound kind of silly, but actually it was a great class where we learned about budgeting, meal planning, how to rent an apartment, and other practical skills needed in the grown-up world. The most enduring piece of advice came from a lesson on food safety. Mrs. Armbrust was teaching us about those moments when you're cleaning out your refrigerator and you can't decide if something is spoiled or not. She said to us with her stern but sunny tone, "When in doubt, throw it out." That phrase has stuck with me for 40 years. My intestines and I are forever in your debt, Mrs. A. The Law and Order Award, Dr. Vernon Keel. Dr. Vernon Keel was the chair of the journalism department at the University of North Dakota while I was going to school there. He was smart, funny, and inspiring. I learned mass comm law from him. I still remember him joking that if we carried our huge mass comm law textbooks around campus, we'd be mistaken for students at UND Law School, and that would be good for our egos. He was the first one to encourage me to think about grad school one day. I lost touch with him after I graduated, but reconnected as a fluke in 2021 when I did a true crime story and podcast on the Turtle Lake murders. It turns out he grew up in Turtle Lake and had written a wonderful book about it, very well researched. The book gave me guidance for my piece. He is both an impressive professor and a great writer. The Attention to Detail Award, Dr. Beth Blanks-Heineman. Dr. Beth Blanks-Heineman was my advisor at North Dakota State University while I was going through the master's program there. I went back to school part-time in the late 90s while still working full-time at WDAY-TV. Dr. Blanks-Heineman ignited in me a passion for the topic of journalism ethics. I still love debating the rights and wrongs of certain scenarios. She also helped me sharpen my writing skills as I wrote my thesis. It wasn't easy going from writing news copy during the day to academic writing at night. But she made me better. As I said, there could be many more awards, but like all award shows, the orchestra is starting to play the music to get me off the stage. But let me just end by saying this. I've done my best and probably failed miserably to try and channel some of these teachers when I've taught my occasional adjunct communications classes at Concordia and Minnesota State University Moorhead. I want to be an encouraging voice to uncertain college students, whether journalism is for them or not. But if all else fails, I can always flip up my hair and remind them to throw out their spoiled food. And that is Back Then. Thanks for joining me. I hope you join me next time.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.